Hello everyone, hope you all are fine. Now we will resume the third and last part of this chapter, Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. So far we have studied Nelson Mandela addressed the inaugural ceremony of his oath-taking ceremony. In his speech he has addressed the world leaders about his feelings. He also has highlighted the difficulties they had to bear. He expressed that all the people in South Africa had to bear the inhuman treatment by the white rulers, and this was due to the policy adopted by white rulers. It was the policy of apartheid, and meaning of apartheid also we have studied. So let us start. He writes, in life every man has twin obligation. Obligations here means the responsibility, a course of action imposed by society, law or conscience by which someone is bound or restricted. This obligation can be imposed by society, can be imposed by law, or can be decided, can be determined by conscience. Conscience means our inner being. What our inner being says, what our moral says, what our moral liabilities are there. So we can compare obligations can be compared as similar like liabilities, but liabilities are more legal, but obligations have more to do with ethics and conscience of an individual. Synonyms of this word commitment, and antonyms of this word are requirement, duty, contract. So you can compare obligation with requirement, duty, contract or a promise, but be careful that these are not exactly the same thing. You cannot replace requirement with obligation. Obligations are more related to our conscience, one's inner being, one's inner call, what one's soul calls to do, that is obligation. And another thing he says, twin obligation. Twin obligation means both the things come simultaneously, one with another, means two things come together, that is twin obligations. So what obligations he mentions here? First thing, to his family, his parents, to his wife and children. This is one obligation. And then obligation to his people, his community and his country. So these are the personal obligations, personal related to family, one's family and society, one's friends. On the other hand, other obligations are for our society and for our country. So you must be knowing we have the obligations, everyone, each one has to deliver, because we are human being, we are social animal, and we have to deliver, we have to give back what we have taken from the society, because many a time we take the things for granted and we consider that this is our right, but actually we are living in a society which is interconnected, interdependent, and this mutual or this coexistence is the root foundation or foundational principle of our life. So we must understand what exactly Mandela want to say. He realized that he had two obligations, one for his family, one for his society. What obligations? Obligations means to fulfill their expectations, fulfill the responsibilities as a father, as a husband, as a son. He has to fulfill the responsibility, he has to do something. This is obligation. We need to take care for our environment, our surrounding, and we need to be kind and compassionate for our fellow human being. Now, Mandela further describes, in a civil and human society, each man is able to fulfill those obligations according to his inclination and abilities. In general, everybody is able to fulfill those obligations in general, in human society. But he says, for person like Mandela in a country like South Africa, it was almost impossible, because they had no freedom. There was no fundamental right, there were no fundamental freedoms, and every black person in South Africa was restricted. His movement was restricted. He could not take up the job of his choice. He could not take up the education he wanted. He could not spend his time freely and settle in any part of the country. All these restrictions made it impossible to fulfill the obligations towards, means both the obligations he could not fulfill. So he says, for a man of my birth and color to fulfill both those obligations, it was almost impossible. Hope you understood this. Now, inclinations natural tendencies of behavior. इरादे हम समझ सकते हैं in Hindi, those ideas which come in our heart and we get motivated, we get prompted to do certain, we behave in a certain manner. These things indicate our inclinations. Now we will see here further. He says that whoever attempted, he further elaborates why is it so. Who attempted to live as a human being was punished and isolated. एक ह्यूमन बीइंग की तरह भी they were not allowed to live freely. They were not able to get education. They did not have any fundamental rights. That is the reason Mandela refers that it was almost impossible. He could not fulfill his responsibilities. In South Africa, a man who tried to fulfill his duty to his people was inevitably ripped from his family. Compulsorily, inevitably, it was sure if any person tried to fulfill his duty, was ripped from his family. Was ripped from his family means was taken away, was snatched, was forcefully taken away from his family and was sent to surely jail or sent somewhere else, but not allowed to do anything a free person, an independent person would like to do. That person would never be allowed to do his things he desired, and his home was forced to live a life apart. This way, Mandela mentions that it was almost impossible for a person like Mandela to fulfill his twin obligations. He further mentions a twilight existence of secrecy and rebellion. Twilight, you know well, it is a word that indicates a time of evening when the sun sets and it is not dark completely. So, a very thin light is there where person can see scarcely something. The meaning of this complete expression, a half secret life lived in the fading light between sunset and darkness. Fading light, when the light becomes very dim, visibility becomes very low. So a person who wanted to discharge his responsibilities, discharge his duties, was sent away or apart from his family, and the person used to live in a twilight existence of secrecy and rebellion. So Mandela felt this and he says that I did not in the beginning choose to place my people above my family, but in attempting to serve my people, I found that I was prevented from fulfilling my obligations as a son, a brother, a father, and a husband. So ultimately he was compelled, he was forced, because he could not discharge his responsibility as his family member also, as a son, as a father, as a brother, as a husband. He could not fulfill any of the responsibility, any of the obligations. So he was compelled, he was forced to become a rebellion. So it was inevitable that he had to become a leader, he had to become a rebellion, and he had to do the work for his society. Let us see here. In human society, because human society is formed on the basis of interdependence and interconnections, we complement and supplement one another. Because of existence and presence of others only, our survival becomes meaningful only because of the presence of others. We feel happy only if there will be others to see our happiness, to share our joys. So whether we are happy or sad, in every situation we need fellow human being, fellow citizens, our family members, our friend, then only we feel happy. And same with you also, you must be feeling and missing your friends, you must be feeling that you should be with your friends. So this is how our human society is functioning, and ultimately we are required to fulfill our obligations anyway. He mentions when he was a child, he was free to do anything. He was free to run in the fields near his mother's hut. He was free to swim in the clear stream, and he was also free to roast mealies under the stars and ride the broad back of slow moving bulls. In our area, people roast either sometimes wheat is also roasted in the open area, sometimes gram is also roasted. Likewise, farmers and rural people, they have this hobby and they enjoy this meal, this kind of food. They also enjoy riding slow moving bulls. So Mandela was free when he was living with his tribe in his tribal community. And he mentioned, as long as I obeyed my father and abided by the customs of my tribe, I was not troubled by the laws of men or God. So he did not require to think about such kind of requirement. He never realized that he was not free. Let us see this word. Mealy means an ear or kernel of maize. भुट्टा हम लोग जिसको कहते हैं, इस टाइप के फूड के लिए mealy वर्ड यूज किया जाता है, and it is mentioned in plural as maize. Now we will see the explanation. It was only when I began to learn that my boyhood freedom was an illusion, when I discovered as a young man that my freedom had already been taken from me, that I began to hunger for it. He started craving for hunger when he realized that his childhood freedom was merely an illusion. Illusion means Brahm, or in English other word we can use a mirage. That is not existing actually, but it appears. Apparently one can see that something is there, but when a person discovers, goes there, the person finds nothing. So this is what we call illusion. So when he realized at first as a student I wanted freedom only for myself. The transitory freedoms of being able to stay out at night, read what I pleased and go where I choose. As a student, he realized that his freedoms were curtailed, his freedoms were denied. He was not allowed to study what he wanted, he was not allowed to move freely when he was a student. And then later as a young man in Johannesburg, I yearned for the basic and honorable freedoms. When he went to Johannesburg for higher studies, he realized that honorable freedoms of achieving his potential, of earning my keep, of marrying and having a family, all these freedoms he was not allowed to do. He was not given these kind of freedoms. See, it is important to understand achieving my potential. As a young boy, you will start discovering the meaning of this aspect, achieving my potential. These days you must be experiencing, in past 1 year also, in last 1 year also, in your class 9th, you must have explored yourself, that you want to express yourself fully. You want to establish your independent identity among your friends. You want to prove yourself. You want to show the world. You want to show your friends that you are something. And this is what Mandela is also expressing. As a youth, he wanted to achieve his potential. Achieve his potential means he wanted to learn the skills and learn many things so that he can discover his real identity. And later he mentions he wanted to earn his keep. Earn one's keep means to earn something that is very much required for one's survival, like earning food or money that we require to keep ourselves alive and healthy. So we can say one's support and maintenance. So he was even not allowed to earn his keep, and he was not allowed to marry or have a family. So these freedoms were obstructed, and he also discovered that these freedoms not to be obstructed in lawful life. If a life is lawful, if any system is working lawfully, if it is a legal system, if it is a fair and just system, then such kind of freedoms cannot be obstructed. ऐसी आज़ादी, ऐसी स्वतंत्रताएं बहुत एसेंशियल है, बेसिक है, हर ह्यूमन बीइंग को मिलना चाहिए किसी भी लीगल या लॉफुल सोसाइटी में. So Mandela mentions how he discovered about the importance of freedom. He is describing here how he observed his family members and himself, that not only he himself was free, but also his family members were also not free. All the people like him have been restricted to do certain things. They were considered unlawful. So everyone who looked like him was not free. As a result, he decided to join African National Congress, and then he started working for the freedom of his people, joining African National Congress. He mentions that his hunger became greater for freedom of all his people, not only he himself only, but free for all his people. So now we will proceed. So when his desire became intense, he started realizing that freedom is a must, and not only he but all the people like him are facing the same type of injustice, and he desired only for the freedom of people in general. And this desire, he mentioned, this desire for freedom of my people to live their life with dignity and self-respect animated his life. Animated means moved his life or gave motivation to him. He wanted that people like him should live with self-respect and dignity. Each one should have a dignified life in society. Dignity and self-respect means in society a person should be considered equal. There should not be unequal treatment with anybody. And this desire animated his life. He started transforming himself. So what transformation went on? Let us see here. He transformed from a frightened young man into a bold one. See, it is very interesting to note, every person is frightened of society, frightened of people, and there is sort of fear. But when one fights for the cause of people in general, then the person becomes bold. You know well about all the freedom fighters. They became fierce, they became bold, they got a daring, they got a confidence because they had the power of truth, they had the power of doing something just and fair. So it is said that honesty is the best policy, being truthful is the best quality, because that makes a person bold and confident. Person becomes a leader, person becomes very important for all the other members. And also he was a law abiding attorney. He was a lawyer. Then see, a lawyer is a person who takes the case into court and fights and argues for the in favor of his client, and fights a case, proceeds or takes the case into the court. So this person, an attorney is expected to be a lawful person, but what he was considered a criminal in the eyes of the supreme authorities, which had adopted the policy of apartheid. So he was considered a criminal, although by profession he was an attorney. And this was what he says, that it was a transformation. And see the extent of sacrifice. Basically he was a family loving husband, but he became a man without a home. A husband or a person who loves his or her family must live in his or her home with his family members, but he became a man without a home. This is the extent of sacrifice. He got the courage and he got the strength to get this transformation for himself because of the values and ideals he was working for. Because of these high ideals and values, he could get the courage and strength to make the whole world his family. And he was a life-loving man. We all love our life and we do not take risk to do something which may put our lives in danger. So we will never dare to take risk. But despite he was life-loving, he lived like a monk, a sannyasin, a sage, a priest who does not settle at any place, who travels from one place to another. एक जगह से दूसरी जगह पर घूमते रहने वाला घुमंतु जो लोग होते हैं, साधु सन्यासी, इनके लिए कहा जाता है कि इनका कोई परिवार नहीं, इनका कोई घर नहीं होता है. तो इस तरीके से he started living his life, and these kind of transformation he experienced in his life. So frightened young man into bold one, and a law-abiding attorney to a criminal, then a family-loving husband into a man without a home, and then life-loving man into a monk. So I am no more virtuous or self-sacrificing than the next man, but I found that I could not even enjoy the poor and limited freedoms I was allowed when I knew my people were not free. Very little freedom, very limited freedoms were given to these people, those who belong to black community, black skin, and he felt that such freedom in part, limited freedom, they are insufficient. They are not sufficient for a person to lead a life, to achieve his potential, to lead a life of happiness. He says further that freedom is indivisible. Freedom cannot be divided. Freedom can be achieved fully. The chains on any one of my people were chains on all of them. If any person of his community would be imprisoned, would be enslaved, would be restricted, that means all the people of his community would be considered under the bondage, under the slavery of the oppressor. So he realized that the chains were not only on him or his people, chains were there on everyone. You know well that he was an attorney. An attorney, a law abiding attorney, he was basically a lawyer. As a result, he might have been given certain kind of freedom, limited freedom, but he felt that it is meaningless to let him be free when people of his community are not free. So here, although he as an attorney, he was allowed to do something, or he was allowed for some limited freedom, but when he realized, when he saw the people of his community did not have those limited freedoms even, then he felt that freedom is indivisible and it should be given to each and everyone in the whole society. So it cannot be divided among some specific categories or selected people. Now finally, in his conclusive paragraph, we come, in the beginning we discussed that oppressor is also the prisoner of hatred. This is what Mandela mentions in this conclusive paragraph. This is very important to understand. He says that oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. It is not only the oppressed who feels, who experiences injustice, but there is other type of injustice going on with the oppressor, because he is filled with hatred, and hatred is a very negative emotion, a very destructive emotion that sets a person's doom, that determines a person's destruction. So hatred is also very much destructive emotion, and it has to be removed from one's heart. This is why Mandela, in a very kind and compassionate manner, he says that even the oppressor is also required to be liberated. He says that a person who has taken away another's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. He is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. Prejudice and narrow-mindedness. The meaning of word prejudice, you can say here, a strong dislike without any good reason, or something one is preoccupied with any thought that is particularly in a negative concern, in a negative direction. That is what we call prejudice. So prejudice and narrow-mindedness are something that is undesired in one's life. He says that a person who is filled of hatred is prisoner of hatred. He is also requiring liberation from such kind of injustice. Similar as just like as an oppressed is facing injustice, similarly oppressor also is experiencing injustice. So he says, I am not truly free if I am taking away someone's freedom, just as surely as I am not free when my freedom is taken from me. It has to be understood very clearly. Mandela is comparing and putting both oppressor and oppressed. He is considering that oppressor and oppressed, they are same. They are experiencing the same injustice. So he says that a person is not truly free. Oppressed is also not free and oppressor is also not free. Both are not free. Oppressor is experiencing injustice, so it's okay, but the oppressed person is also experiencing injustice, and his freedom has been taken away. You must have observed that a person who is filled with hatred remains preoccupied, remains every time in trouble, is not happy. he cannot experience happiness until he takes out all his hatred, until he removes this negative feeling from his heart. So he further mentioned the oppressed and oppressors, the oppressed and oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. Both have been robbed of their humanity. This is the conclusive line and very important line. You need to explain it. You can see here in this description. Please go through it and note it down if you desire. Otherwise, this explanation you will be required to write in your answers in the exam if the question is asked. जिसके दिल में, जिसके मन में घृणा भरी हुई है, वो खुद भी बंधन में है, वो खुद भी अपने ट्रू एग्जिस्टेंस में, एक्चुअल एग्जिस्टेंस में नहीं है. इन हिंदी देयर इज अ ब्यूटीफुल वर्ड स्वस्थ, अपने आप में स्थित होना. अ पर्सन हु इज feeling hatred, who is having hatred in his heart, is not healthy. It is the indication of an unhealthy mindset, unhealthy heart. So it is very much essential that every human being must be filled with love, kind and compassion. So our natural qualities, basic qualities are to remain happy and kind for every moment in our life. This is how one can consider himself free. So real freedom lies in happiness, kindness, compassion, love and caring for everybody. So this is all about this part, this last part. Now you will be required to answer these oral questions. You can answer these questions verbally and you can send me your answers on my personal contact. You can record your voice and you can send your answers, written textbook question answers. You are already having PDF form of this text of this chapter, so you need to answer these questions, and any difficulty you please ask me your question. So thank you, wish you all the best and wish you a very happy time. Take very good care of yourself and stay home, stay safe.